He hit me in my dress whites. Not in a back room. Not in a whisper. In front of 280 people, COs, SEALs, generals, my brothers and his board, then sneered at the ribbons on my chest like they were party favors. That was the last thing my father ever gave me. Humiliation with a luxury label. I'm Rowan Park, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. Daughter of Bennett Park, real estate kingmaker, magazine cover smile. The man who groomed sons to inherit and a daughter to disappear. I didn't disappear. Not when he cut me off for choosing the service. Not when he ignored every deployment and promotion. And not when he tried to take one last swing in a chapel full of people who'd bled beside me. If you want to understand how my fiancé, yes, a SEAL, ended up holding my father's wrist, you need what came before the crack of his hand. The slap wasn't the breaking point. It was the verdict. I heard it before the heat hit my cheek. A clean, brutal pop that bounced off stained glass and stone. My face burned, but I stayed locked. Same way I held steady in Kandahar grit and on pitching decks near Okinawa. This wasn't his first attempt to knock me over. It was just the first one with 280 witnesses. I was halfway down the aisle at St. Helena's Cathedral in Houston, dress whites pressed, cover tucked under my arm. The man who struck me wasn't an enemy combatant. He was Bennett Park, chairman of Park Holdings, darling of panels and fundraisers. America's favorite developer and the one person who never respected what I'd built. Halfway between two worlds. To my left, dark suits, silk ties, gleaming cufflinks, the hush of money and gossip. To my right, uniforms, service stripes, a few prosthetics catching the light, eyes that had watched the same horizon I had. Then my father stepped out, a statue in designer wool. His voice cut clean. Take off those silly medals. I didn't debate it. No. His hand fell. It landed on more than skin. It swung at every night I sat with a headset, listening to dead air for the ping that meant a convoy made it. It took aim at every mile I earned and every inch of ground I refused to surrender. He didn't just hit his daughter. He swung at a life I fought for. I hadn't moved when my fiancé stepped in. No shouting. No show. Just controlled force as Mason Cole's fingers closed around my father's wrist. Calm voice, steady, lethal in its clarity. You just struck a decorated U.S. Navy officer. Chairs scraped. People rose. Not in chaos, in witness. In that instant I stopped being Bennett Park's girl. I belonged to myself. I grew up in a mansion that photographed warmer than it lived. The Park Place in Highland Park ran in glossy features. Mahogany paneling, baccarat chandeliers, a 3-story wine vault, a grand piano no one touched for 17 years. No pancakes. No Sunday drift. Just the tick of clocks and compliments that sounded like quarterly reports. My brothers, Grant, Oliver and Reed, were the Park portfolio. Monogrammed shirts by preschool, golf lessons with dad, mock IPOs before freshman algebra. Me. You'll be judged by the man you marry, not what you do. He never said it with his eyes on mine. He never needed to. My mother never argued with him. She staged quiet mutinies. Books about aviators slid onto my shelf. A leather notebook embossed, "You define your value." One night she left a brochure for the U.S. Naval Academy in my desk drawer. I stared at it, she smiled. You don't have to inherit anything, Ro. You just have to live true. I mailed the application. I remember the dinner I told them, same as every night. Silver cutlery, medium rare, soft gold light, a silence colder than any fight. Dad asked Grant about Morgan Stanley. I waited, then said, I applied to Annapolis. Silence snapped. Oliver choked on water. Reed rolled his eyes. Dad set down his knife. The oak table seemed to groan. If you go through with this military phase, don't come back, he said. I didn't cry. I looked at my mother. She nodded, no tears, just a look that said you'll survive. 3 months later, pancreatic cancer took her. Her last note, hold to what's true even if no one claps. It lives behind my ID card and under my ribcage where applause can't reach. The first time I stood on the Academy's field at 0500, cold needled through fabric. A junior officer walked by, glanced at my name tape, smirked. Park's princess trying on a uniform. I didn't answer. I dropped, counted reps in my head, turned his noise into fuel. I didn't spend my first tours trying to prove anything to Bennett. I wasn't on a crusade. I served because it was right. No letters home, no holiday calls, no expectation of proud of you. a phrase I hadn't heard since 10. After an ambush in Helmand, I was logistics, not direct action. But when a flatbed went up, I low-crawled through blowing sand and yanked a corporal clear of the axle. When the bird finally lifted and the blood on me wasn't mine, the CO pinned a commendation. I mailed Dad a photo, me saluting, metal case in hand. A week later, an envelope came back. No note, just a magazine page. Reed Park named youngest CFO in Texas, underlined. His scrawl. Now this is success. I fed it to the incinerator. Watched paper burn and felt nothing. I met Mason at Naval Station Mayport during a joint logistics brief. Redundant lines on a map, 3 hours of contingencies, 4 hours of sleep. Hair pulled too tight. Voice cracked on slide 7. Didn't expect anyone to care. After he walked up with training gloves still on eyes level. You're not moving cargo, he said. You're moving lives. It wasn't flattery. It was accuracy. It was the first time in years I felt seen without a last name or rank in the way. Chow hall dinners turned to late-night coffee, then PT we didn't strictly need. Mason didn't fill silence, he respected it. He remembered I don't eat sugar and that I tap out of conversations that start with, "You're pretty smart for a woman." On a rainy pier in Norfolk he pulled a small box. "Can't promise calm seas," he said. "But I'll row." I didn't cry. I nodded. I sent a card to Dallas. Getting married. St. Helena's. 1300, dress whites. No RSVP required. Translation: I don't need your permission. No answer. Not even a blank email. I knew he'd show. Not for me, for optics. The thought of anyone whispering that Bennett Park skipped his only daughter's wedding would sting worse than seeing me in uniform. He arrived 3 nights before at my aunt's pre-ceremony dinner. Tailored black suit, champagne cufflinks, cologne like boardroom varnish. He leaned close. "You are not wearing that uniform in front of Houston's donors." "I'm not marrying you," I said. "I'm marrying Mason. I'll wear what tells the truth." That night, while I pressed my whites at Ellington Field, a familiar unsaved number lit up. One text: "You'll regret tomorrow." I powered down my phone, unfolded my mother's note, and traced the line I've carried into every AO. Hold to what's true. An hour before the ceremony, I stood in the side hall breathing wax and cedar. On my left, Commander Hale, who got us home from Syria with no margin for error. On my right, Chief Torres, grin carved by fire and a carbon fiber leg that never slowed him. Full uniform, both of them. Not a battle, but we wore the same gravity. "You look like a CO stepping onto the field," Hale said. "Only difference is we're walking with you," Torres added. I peeked through the doors. Left pews. Crisp collars, 5-figure suits, champagne smiles. People who came for proximity to Bennett. Right pews. Uniforms, scars, quiet. People who showed up because service is a promise. I stepped out. Each footfall echoed. Sunlight caught on my ribbons, not decoration, record. Halfway he stepped into the aisle. No one gasped. Maybe they expected it. Bennett's shoes hit stone like a gavel. "Take off the medals," he said. Not loud, surgical. No. The slap cracked. A glass tinked behind me. Someone inhaled hard. I rooted. The air went heavy. Before I could shift, Mason was there. One measured step, a line crossed. His hand closed on my father's wrist. Firm, not violent. "You just struck a U.S. Navy officer." Hale's voice rang out, sharp enough to cut marble. "Admiral on deck." Uniforms snapped to attention. Civilians stood because respect is contagious. 280 people watched a mogul shrink into a man. Bennett recoiled. Mason released him with the care you give something already broken. No threats. No theater. Just a look that said, "This conversation is over." My father glanced left. His donors, his partners, the circle that used to orbit him. No one moved to save him. He lowered his head, not in apology but in loss, and slipped out the rear doors. No empire followed. I didn't watch him go. I didn't need to. 32 years and 3 combat zones taught me the only approval that counts is the one you can stand inside. Mason returned to my side, fingers brushing mine. Solidarity, not rescue. Hale and Torres stepped back. The chaplain cleared his throat into the mic. "Shall we continue?" "Yes," I said. Steady. The ceremony went on. No spectacle, just truth. After Mason's thumb found the heat still ghosting my cheek. Does it hurt? Not anymore. They won't remember the strike, he said. They'll remember you didn't move. He was right. The point wasn't the slap. It was that I stood. Not Bennett's daughter. Not a brand extension. Rowan Park. And they would remember me for that. The house looked like warmth in magazines. Never felt like it. No pancake smell on Sundays, no slow mornings. Just polished footsteps, clocks measuring output, and compliments phrased like quarterly guidance. Grant, Oliver, and Reed were the park portfolio. Monograms in preschool, tea times with dad, mock IPOs before algebra. Me. People will judge you by the man you marry, not what you build. He said it often, rarely while meeting my eyes. My mother staged quiet mutinies. She slid biographies of women who flew and fought onto my shelves. Gave me a leather notebook stamped, "You define your value." One night she tucked a U.S. Naval Academy brochure into my desk. I looked up, the softest nod. You don't need to inherit a crown, Ro. You just need to live true. I carried that brochure like a talisman until the day I mailed the application. I remember the dinner I told them. Silver cutlery, medium rare, light warm as honey, a silence colder than ice. Dad quizzed Grant about Morgan Stanley. I waited for him to finish, then said, I submitted to Annapolis. The room tightened. Oliver sputtered water. Reed rolled his eyes. Dad set his knife down. Even the oak table seemed to creak. If you choose this phase, he said, don't come back. I didn't argue. I looked at my mother. No tears, just a look that translated to "You'll make it." 3 months later, pancreatic cancer took her. Her last line to me lives behind my ID card. Hold to what's true even if no one claps. It's the anchor I never take off. First morning on the yard, 0500 stung. Cold threaded straight through the uniform. A JO glanced at my name tape, smirked. Park's princess trying on camis? I didn't bite. I dropped and counted, each rep a fuse turning his static into fuel. Those first tours I wasn't trying to convert Bennett. I wasn't grandstanding. I served because the compass pointed there. No letters home. No holiday calls. No expectation of hearing "proud of you," a phrase retired when I was 10. Hellman proved the math can change fast. I was logistics, not trigger pull. But when a flatbed lit up and a corporal got pinned, I low-crawled through hissing sand and dragged him free. When the bird finally lifted, the blood on me wasn't mine. The CO pinned a commendation. I mailed Dad a photo, hand-to-brow metal case at my side. A week later an envelope returned. No note, just a glossy feature. Reed Park, youngest CFO in Texas. Underlined. In his handwriting. Now this is success. I fed it to the incinerator and watched the page curl without feeling a thing. I met Mason at a joint logistics brief at Mayport. Redundant routes, contingency branches, 3 hours of diagrams on 4 hours of sleep. My bun was a little crooked. My voice cracked once. Didn't expect anyone to notice. Afterward he walked up, training gloves still on, gaze steady. You're not routing pallets, he said. You're routing people. Not flattery. Calibration. It's the first time in years I felt seen without a last name attached. Chow Hall turned to late coffee, then PT we didn't strictly need. He didn't smother silence, he trusted it. He remembered I skip sugar, hate tomatoes, and bail when a conversation starts with, "You're pretty smart for a woman." On a wet pier in Norfolk he pulled a small box. "I can't promise calm seas," he said. "But I'll row." I nodded. That was enough. I sent a card to Dallas. Getting married. St. Helena's Cathedral. 1300, dress whites. No RSVP necessary. Translation, permission revoked. Silence. No call, no blank email. I knew he'd come anyway, not for love but optics. The whisper that Bennett Park skipped his only daughter's wedding would chafe worse than seeing me in uniform. I was right. 3 nights out, my aunt hosted a small pre-ceremony dinner in Austin. He arrived in black tailoring and champagne cufflinks, cologne like fresh varnish on a board table. He leaned close, voice for me alone. "You will not wear that uniform in front of Houston's donors." "I'm not marrying you," I said. "I'll wear what tells the truth." He showed up dressed like a quarterly report. Ink black suit, champagne cufflinks, Italian leather precise enough to squeak. The cologne hit like fresh varnish in a boardroom. Powerful, artificial, overdone. I turned away. He closed the distance. Low voice for me alone. You're not wearing that uniform in front of Houston's elite. Cold scraped my throat, but I didn't give an inch. I'm not marrying you, I said. I'm marrying Mason, and I'll wear what tells the truth. He eased back, poured a bourbon, studied me the way you study a line item you've already decided to write off. That night at Ellington Field, I pressed my whites till the creases could cut glass. The unsaved number I knew by heart lit up. You'll regret tomorrow. I powered the phone down, slid a hand into the pocket over my heart, unfolded my mother's note, and traced the line I've carried through every AO. Hold to what's true even if no one claps. St. Helena's side corridor smelled of wax and cedar, a draft threading through old stone. To my left stood Commander Hale, the one who got us out of Syria when we had no fuel and no slack. To my right, Chief Torres, combat ribbon, carbon fiber leg, grin that said he'd been through fire and learned to laugh anyway. Full dress, both of them quiet, ready. You look like a CO walking onto the field, Hale said. Only difference this time, Torres added, we're walking with you. I cracked the door, took stock. Left side. Crisp collars, five-figure suits, champagne smiles. People who came for proximity to Bennett Park. Right side. Uniforms, scars, and the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's earned. I stepped out. Each heel strike rang the stone. Sunlight broke through stained glass and lit my ribbons. Records, not decoration. Halfway he did what I knew he would. Stepped into the aisle. No one stopped him. Maybe no one was surprised. Shoes hitting stone like a gavel, he set himself between me and Mason, between the past and my choice. Take off the medals, he said. Not loud. Surgical. No. His hand came up. The crack tore the air. Heat flared across my cheek. Glass pinged somewhere behind me. A breath snagged near the windows. I didn't move. You learn to stand still when the ground shakes. The room thickened. Hale's jaw ticked. Torres's fingers curled around the carbon shaft of his cane. Before I shifted a foot, Mason crossed the line. One measured step. His hand closed around my father's wrist. Firm, not cruel. Final. 8 words, level and lethal in their clarity. You just struck a United States Navy officer. Silence broke. Hale's voice snapped through the chapel. Admiral on deck. Uniforms rose like one body. Silver hair and fresh fades, battle ribbons and brass. All of them to attention. Even civilians stood, unsure but reverent. 280 witnesses watched a man who could silence boardrooms shrink to his actual size. Uniforms snapped crisp. Hands to brows. Even civilians, unsure of the choreography, rose because respect has gravity. 280 people, many who used to toast my father's deals, looked at him and saw something smaller than the legend. Bennett Park, who could still a boardroom with a glance, stood trembling, Mason's grip firm on his wrist. Not a mogul. Just a man who'd spent his last reserves of the only currency he couldn't buy back. Respect. Bennett stepped back. Mason released him slowly, the way you set down something already cracked. No glare. No speech. Just the steadiness of someone who's seen real firefights and decided this didn't rate another round. His eyes said the rest. We're done here. My father turned toward the left pews. His financiers, developers, legacy donors, the people who'd built their names in his orbit. What stared back wasn't fear. It was recognition. They had just watched him strike a United States Navy officer, his own daughter, in front of the uniform. No rescue came. No throat cleared. No interruption. Bennett lowered his head, not in apology but in loss. He pivoted, walked the aisle alone, past handshakes that used to mean leverage, through a silence thick enough to wade, and slipped out the rear doors. No applause followed him. No empire moved in his shadow. Don't make me look bad. He'd ruled my childhood with that line. Now he needed no help. He looked small all by himself. I didn't follow. Didn't need to watch him vanish. 32 years and 3 combat zones had already taught me the rule I live by. I don't require his approval to know where true north is. Mason stepped back to my side, eyes steady, fingers brushing mine, not to hold me up but to stand with me. Commander Hale and Chief Torres shifted one pace back, duty done, flank secure. The chaplain leaned into the mic, voice tight. Shall we continue? I didn't look over my shoulder. Yes, I said. Pling. Final. The ceremony moved forward without theatrics. No fireworks, just truth. Mason's hand found mine, Same grip from the first day he walked up to me after a brief with training gloves still on. The same hand that once pulled a stranger out of a riptide. The hand that filed transfer requests for teammates who couldn't ask for themselves. The hand that tapped between my shoulder blades when the weight of memory made air feel thin. To protect, to serve, to honor, the chaplain said. They weren't just words. They were the shape of every night I served unseen. Suddenly all of it had a home. Not everyone gets to stand inside a space built by sacrifice and still call it joy. Outside after, Mason brushed his thumb across my cheek where the heat lingered faintly. Does it hurt? He asked. Not anymore. They won't remember the strike, he said quietly. They'll remember that you didn't move. I didn't answer. He was right. The point was never the slap. It was that I stood, didn't flinch, didn't fold. That moment wasn't humiliation. It was reclamation. Of voice. Of name. Of the space I spent years earning without apology. For the first time, I wasn't hauling the weight of proving anything. I was simply walking inside the truth I had chosen. Not Bennett Park's daughter. Not someone's embarrassment. Not leverage on a ledger. I was Rowan Park. And they'd remember me for the way I held the line, not for the man who tried to cross it.